the committee, Councilor Asabi George. I want to remind everyone that this is a public hearing, so it's being recorded and broadcast on Comcast Channel 8 and RCN Channel 82. If you have cell phones, please silence them. That includes me as well. We will take public testimony, so if folks want to testify about any of these grants, we'll do that at the end. I just ask that folks sign in and check the box saying that they do want to testify. And when you do come up, I will ask that you limit your comments to a few minutes and state your name and affiliation. We have a total of 5 grants this morning. We're going to start with docket number 0600, a message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $41,412 in the form of a grant awarded by Demand Abolition to be administered by the Police Department. The grant will fund Cities Empowered Against Sexual Exploitation Network Phase 2 for law enforcement interventions, technology, and research-based innovations. This matter was referred to the committee on April 26, 2017. Rather than read through all, I'll just read this one, and then I'll turn it over to Maria Cheevers, who's the Director of Research and Development for BPD. Thank you, Maria. Go right ahead.
Excuse me. About 4 years ago, Hunt Alternatives, which is a national foundation, had chosen Boston as one of 11 sites across the country that would be allowed the opportunity to test out innovative technologies and other strategies to reduce demand for sex buying. There was a lot of data that went into the decision to choose Boston as one of the network sites, and since that time we have been given a wide range of training and technology for our human trafficking unit, as well as for our human trafficking unit to train other law enforcement entities across the state on how to use technology to reduce sex buying online, and also to do reverse strings in the community, as well as a wide range of other demand reduction strategies, including working with our faith community and congregations to educate them around sex buying in Boston and the numbers and the scope of the problem in Boston, as well as organizing the business community. So right now we have 3 efforts. We have a law enforcement focused effort, which is an effort to reduce demand by deterring buyers through the use of technology in partnerships with other law enforcement groups. We have a faith engagement piece, which is really about organizing the faith community and educating them and teaching them ways to reduce demand within their congregations and staff, as well as a business engagement effort in partnership with the Attorney General's office, in which we will be working with the business community to work on human resource strategies and policies to reduce demand. This particular grant was given to us to help us coordinate those 3 strategies. It's $41,412. It pays for a part-time coordinator to help staff all 3 efforts. It also pays for overtime for the human trafficking unit to do stings, reverse stings through Facebook and Google ad campaigns, and to go out and basically increase risk for buyers of sex, and the indirect cost that goes to the city. Those are the 3 efforts that we're supporting, and in partnership we are working with the Mayor's Office, the Attorney General's Office, Hunt Alternatives, which is the funding agency, Demand Abolition, which is the national and international network, and Cease Network Partners, which is about another, I think there's another 12 now because they've increased the numbers since we were originally given the funds, and Cease Boston's planning and implementation team, which is citywide leadership from different sectors and communities in Boston.
How much was the first phase of this grant?
The first grant was given, it was a $30,000 grant, and it was given to a consulting group to help organize some of the early strategic planning efforts.
And this is the second phase, so we've only received funding through this twice, right?
Yes, and then we recently, through another partner, received an additional $10,000 that will just be used to train 5 other law enforcement agencies in the Boston area on how to do this work.
Do you anticipate getting this again, or is this sort of?
We anticipate applying applying for more funding through other foundation sources. The Hunt Alternatives are moving their efforts to Washington, D.C.
Right.
And they're trying to set up more of a policy and lobbying arm to get legislatures in both the House and the Senate in D.C. to understand why demand reduction is the route to take to sort of reduce this exploitation.
And my last question before I turn it over to my colleagues is, have you seen an impact in terms of the various metrics that you use to determine whether or not this is having an impact?
So the beauty of working with Hunt Alternatives and demand abolition is that we work with CEASE partners all over the country, and it just so happened that the CEASE people have done a lot of work around the technology piece. And so there was a lot of deep data mining early on that showed us the size and the scope of the problem in the Boston area. And then around last January, we did a series of campaigns where we disrupted purchases online through Google AdWord campaigns, which allowed us to do reverse stings. After about 6 weeks of doing this, we then went back and looked at the big data, and we saw a marked decrease in the number of men that were purchasing sex online in Boston. So it did actually impact people in that it deterred and, I'm sure, scared a lot of would-be buyers in the Boston area from going online to purchase. That was just one avenue, though. That was Backpage at the time. And then they moved over to a dating section. So the activity's still going on, but there was a lot going on with Backpage, as you'll recall, also at the same time.
Thank you, very helpful.
Yep.
I'm going to turn it over to Councilor McCarthy. Have any questions?
No, my questions were based on database, and you just answered that question, so I'm good, thank you.
Awesome. Councilor Sabi George?
I'm good, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Anything more to add, Maria?
Well, if anyone's interested in knowing the impact in Boston, please give our office a call. My name's Maria Cheevers. I'm the Director of Research, and I can give you the numbers to help you understand better the size and the scope of the problem in the city of Boston.
Thank you, and thank you to your team for all you guys do.
Thanks.
Now moving on to docket number 1005. This is a message in order authorizing the police commissioner to accept and expend a grant of $250,000 from the Boston Regional Intelligence Center. Its fiscal year 17 allocation awarded by the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security. This grant will provide upgrades, expansion, and integration of technology and protocols related to anti-terrorism, anti-crime, anti-gang, and emergency response. And today, to testify in docket number 1005, David Carabin, who is Assistant Chief of the Bureau of Intelligence and Analysis and the Director of the BRIC. Thank you for being here this morning.
So this project is using EOPS funding to purchase IBM technology and technology services. The technology is titled I2 Enterprise Insight Analysis and I2 Enterprise Insight Analysis Recommendation Engine. And the contract that we're looking to move forward on includes the costs of these platforms, that's software licensing, as well as project management, technical assistance, and training. And the purpose of the software is related to our efforts to increase the efficiencies of Boston Police Department's internal data systems. As you may know, there are numerous data systems that information is collected and placed into on a daily basis, from police reports to different interactions. There are a lot of inconsistencies in the way that the data is placed in there, which makes analysis sometimes, well, always very, very complicated. Especially when we're dealing with very, very large volumes of data. So what these systems are meant to do is provide more precise formatting of the data so that we can search across systems and get faster responses and more efficient responses, deduplication of duplicate records, and ultimately be able to provide analysis that helps police deployment more precisely and more accurately.
So this is a contract that you guys are currently pursuing, not currently?
We are currently engaged in it. It's a continuation of that contract.
Okay, and how long has this contract been in place?
Since September.
September.
So we're in the first phase of that project right now, and it's integrating with a series of internal BPD data sources. And what this funding will do is it will contribute towards further integration, further refinement of the system, as well as some training. And I think that pretty much covers it.
And when you say the system, can you break that apart in layman terms?
Sure.
For people who are obviously watching, what that means and some examples of what the technology is used for.
Absolutely. So what it's going to provide is a analytic interface. So when an analyst comes in and they have a request to support an investigation, or perhaps within our real-time crime center when a new incident occurs out in the street, say a shooting or something along those lines, based on information they have, they will run queries within the system. Currently, right now, in order for us to provide background on any types of criminal investigations, we have to go through dozens of systems, retrieve records back, analyze that information, draw connections between people, places, and things. We refer to them as entities, and then provide information back to the investigators that are working in the street. In the case of shootings, oftentimes this is to prevent retaliatory violence. Based on information that we have, we might be able to deploy officers to certain areas of the city where we expect there to be retaliation. So ultimately what this analytic interface will do is it will provide some streamlining. It will process data automatically. It'll go through and it will process data. It will look for what's called entity resolution. So when officers are entering data into free-form fields, oftentimes there are different ways to represent the data. So Boston Police Department, for example, you could put Boston Police Department as the location, 1 Schroeder Plaza, 1199 Tremont Street, so on and so forth. And with names, I could be Dave Carabin, David Carabin, Davey Carabin, D Carabin, you name it. What it does is it looks to streamline those entities for faster response and more accurate results. We're looking at approximately, I believe, around 16,000 new entities go into the system on a monthly basis, so we're dealing with a lot, right? So back to the platform, it will allow for the analysts to get quicker and more accurate results, deduplicating that data. And it will also provide visualization tools so that we can do some link analysis and see connections between people, places, incidents, and things, and ultimately be able to draw conclusions on things that are going on.
My last question before I turn it over. When you pull the information, so you put your name in, you put addresses in, where is that information coming from?
It's coming
What are
from
the sources?
the sources of data are internal BPD records management system sources. So that could be everything from arrest records to incident reports, field interview reports, as well as internal BRIC records.
Thank you. Councilor McCarthy?
I'm good, thanks.
Councilor Sabi George?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Does this at all help our police officers file reports from their vehicles?
No, unrelated.
Can we get to that point?
Yeah, I believe that there are tools in place now that are a different unit within the police department. ISG would be looking to deploy those types of resources. I couldn't speak to the timeline on that, though,
Okay.
ma'am.
I just imagine that if we want to collect this data as quickly as possible and be able to use it to respond,
Of course.
that if we can do it in almost real time,
Sure.
that would be incredibly helpful.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else you want to add?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Moving right along, this is docket number 1051, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend a grant of $3,253,317 for the FY18 Public Safety Answering Point Support and Incentive Grant, awarded by the Massachusetts Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, to be administered by the Police Department. The grant will fund the costs associated with providing enhanced 911 services. This matter was referred to the committee on August 2nd, 2017. And then the second one is docket number 1053, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend a grant of $684,121 for the FY18 State 911 Training Grant, awarded by the Massachusetts Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, to be administered by the Police Department. This grant will fund training and certification of enhanced 911 telecommunications staff. The matter was referred to the committee on August 2nd, 2017. Here to testify on dockets number 1051 and 1053, Deputy Superintendent Commander Michael Cox of the Operations Division, Bureau of Field Services for the Police Department. Is that correct? Okay, take it away. Thank you.
18 Public Safety Answering Point Grant basically is a formulated grant that's comprised of call volume for the city and the number of population in the city, and it's given by the State 911 Department to help defray the costs associated with running a 911 department. This year, our funds will be utilized by both the Police Department, Fire Department, and EMS to defray the cost associated with maintenance and upgrade to our CAD system, our computer-aided dispatch system, intended to basically increase our efficiency and accuracy. Also, the funds will be used to cover both Boston Fire and EMS maintenance fees associated with the 911 operations of the CAD system as well. Also, we were using some of the funds to upgrade our NICE system, which is a 911 recording system for all the 911 calls and operations. And additionally, the funds will be used to defray the costs associated with 911 communication personnel and including dispatchers and some of the supervisors. That's for docket 1051. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'll just turn it over before we move on to 1053. Councilor McCarthy, any questions on 1051? Councilor Sabi George? All right. 1053, thank you.
1053 is basically our training grant. The 911 division that we have, all the people employed there are certified by the State 911 Department, and they're responsible for getting 16 hours of continuing education credits. And this covers the cost of those credits for all the individuals that work for both Boston Police, Fire, and EMS in the 911 division portions. It also covers additional overtime and backfill for the individuals that actually go to the trainings during the year.
Can you, these grants have come through the committee before, but can you remind me, both for docket number 1051 and 1053, how long we've received the grants? Have they gone up or down over time?
So the grants have gone up, certainly over the last 6 years, as long as I've been in operations. And it's likely to be renewed for the next couple of years. Again, it is based off of our call volume, which has kind of gone up over the past few years, and the population size of the city, as far as the 911 calls are concerned. And
Very helpful. Councilor McCarthy, any questions on Councilor Sabi George? Anything else you want to add?
no,
Well, thank you for being here this morning, and thank you for all you do. And David, I didn't tell you the same. Thank you for all you do. Moving right along, this is docket number 1300, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend $115,872 in the form of a grant for the FY17 Port Security Grant Program awarded by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security to be administered by the Police Department. The grant will fund the installation and repowering of the Boston Police Department Harbor Patrol Unit vessels, the 31 Safe and the 28
Kwijak.
Say that again? Kwijak boat. This matter was referred to the committee on October 4th, 2017. To testify on docket number 1300, we have Sergeant Joseph Cheevers of the Boston Police Harbor Patrol Unit, Harbor Master, and Lieutenant Kevin McGoldrick. Did I say that right?
That's right.
Okay. Lieutenant McGoldrick from the Boston Police Department Special Operation Division. Saying all this for the record.
Morning.
I'll let you guys take it away.
Good morning. So this is the port security grant that we apply for pretty regularly, and this year we were awarded funds to repower these two specific boats. They're very heavily used utility vessels for patrol, and in the summer we have the EMS involved. There's also special events, the LNG, and pretty standard patrol vessels that have outlived the useful lives of their current outboard engines. Joe, anything to add to?
No, but pretty much, I mean, they use, in addition to patrol on other areas, the dive team uses the 31 Safe boat to conduct dive training and dive operations off of. It has an extended cabin. It's called the EMT version, so there's 2 triage beds, so that's usually the boat we have Boston EMS assigned to during the summer months.
For triage use?
For medical response calls. And,
Can you talk through how long you've received this grant? And if it's gone up or down over time?
This one's sporadic, isn't it?
So the port security grants program came in to effect after 9/11, about a year after 9/11. And pretty much all of our vessels have been funded through port security grants. And now it's just a matter of maintenance, annual maintenance for them.
Councilor McCarthy, any questions?
No questions, just a quick statement. You run a great ship down there.
Yeah, no pun intended. But if I didn't say that, then the Hurleys and the Powells and Smitty would be, I'd be in trouble with them, so I figured I'd give them a little shout out.
Joe and his team do a great job down there. We got a
Yeah,
great,
they really
great
do.
bunch of guys.
I was there for the launching of the Jeremiah Hurley, tremendous, tremendous addition to a great squad. And, Jerry Hurley I grew up in Jerry's parish, so I knew him and his family well. So it was a great day to put that ship in the water. So,
That was.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Councilor Sabi George?
Quick question. You had mentioned that this is an annual grant to maintain the fleet, or the 3 vessels. Do we have a capital plan to replace, should that time come?
Replace the vessel?
Yeah.
Right now, all the vessels are as far as maintenance, other than the engines, they're all in, I'd say, very good shape.
I guess I don't know the life
So lifespan,
expectancy of.
they have aluminum hulls, and as long as you you paint the bottoms to keep growth off of them, and as far as electrolysis problems in water, you have sacrificial metals like zinc that you have to annually change those out, because they get those would be the first, when there's electric currents in the water, and they'd eat the aluminum hulls if you didn't have your zincs on there and your hulls painted. So that's something we do annually. And you probably have somewhere as long as it's properly maintained, a 25-year lifespan.
Oh, wow.
on
I
these
didn't
ships.
realize that.
Yeah.
We do put contracts out every year or so for maintenance. So there's a maintenance schedule, and that's designed to optimize the life of the equipment. But it is basically a number of hours run. Eventually, the machinery's going to wear down. So the boat might be fine, but the engines need to be replaced periodically. And that's either built in through a grant, or the maintenance is built in through a bid process. And we have a couple of different entities. One maintains the diesel, and another maintains the gas outputs.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant, and thank you, Sergeant, for being here, and thank you for testifying. Anything else you want to add?
No, Council.
Okay, thank you for all you do.
Thanks very much.
Last docket is docket number 1377. This is a message in order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend a grant of $225,044 for the FY 2017 DNA Capacity Enhancement and Backlog Reduction Program awarded by the National Institute of Justice to be administered by the Police Department. The grant would fund 2 criminalist positions, lab supplies, and continuing education expenses. Matter was referred to the committee on October 25th, 2017. Today to testify in docket number 1377, Julie James, who's a criminalist and DNA technical leader at the Boston Police Department Crime Lab. Thank you for being here this morning.
Good morning. Yes, I'm testifying on the DNA backlog reduction grant this morning. This grant is primarily to fund 2 criminalist positions that we have in-house in the laboratory, one in the criminalistics unit and one in the DNA section. We've maintained this grant, or a version thereof, for at least 12 years, so we've been very fortunate to increase the staffing level of the crime laboratory in general by 2 positions for a number of years. In addition, we do have, much like the deputy mentioned, we have continuing education requirements. These are requirements that are put forth by our accreditation guidelines. So each DNA analyst must maintain or participate in at least 8 hours of continuing education each calendar year. So this grant does allow for travel and registration costs for continuing education, and we have been successful in utilizing that for the DNA analysts to allow the operating budget train the other members of the crime laboratory that are not in the DNA section. In addition, we do have some money for supplies that can be utilized by the analysts that are funded by the grant, and other minimal costs like fringe benefits and other things are covered for the personnel as well as part of the grant money.
Thank you. Councilor McCarthy? Councilor Asabi George?
I have a couple questions.
Yep, go right
I'm always so fascinated by the work that the crime lab does. So this is to reduce the amount of backlog. What is the backlog with the lab currently?
Let me just see, the grant does ask about that, so I can tell you that. And as part of our grant application, they do ask us for the backlog as of January 1st, 2016, and that was 679 cases. And so bringing additional staff into the lab, obviously, it allows us to process more casework, and so that helps us to reduce the backlog there.
Is there a national standard for a typical amount of backlog? Because I would say when we're talking about crime and solving crime, that we should not have a backlogs, but I don't know what the typical standard or the acceptable standard would be.
I think there's probably no acceptable standard, really. However, based on my experience of going to nationwide conferences, it varies widely. However, as far as the grant is concerned, they define a case as being in backlog if it's been in 30 days since the commission of the crime, or reporting of the crime, excuse me, and if there's no report at that point, within 30 days, it's considered a backlog case. So it's a 30-day timeline. There are laboratories that have tens of thousands of cases in their backlog. There are other laboratories that have a 14-day turnaround time. Overwhelmingly, talking to labs across the country at the conferences, more people have a longer backlog or a larger backlog than we do, given the number of analysts we have. So we have 2 fully trained caseworking analysts in the DNA section right now, and we have 3 in training, including one of our grant-funded analysts. So we do have a plan, a strategic plan, if you will, to increase the personnel through the grant and through operating funds to reduce the number of cases in backlog and reduce the turnaround time from submission to generation of a report.
And of those backlogged cases, how many, is it broken down at all by how many days they've been backlogged?
That's a good question. Of the 600, I guess I can say that of the 679 that were on hand on January 1st, 2016, 616 were 30 days, over 30 days old.
I think, doesn't that qualify as backlog once it hits 30 days?
Correct.
So they'd all be 30 plus?
616 would be 30 plus.
And then the rest would be less than 30?
Less than 30,
But then they
right.
wouldn't be considered backlog?
Correct, technically.
No. I'm fascinated by it because I think that in Boston we should have 0. And I'm also curious always about our relationship with the state police and their crime lab and the work that they're doing for us, and whether or not we could be doing a better job, and a quicker job, and a more efficient job, I suppose. What of those 679 cases, is there a particular theme on why they might be backlogged? So is it a particular analyst that does a particular task that we're short of? I understand this is for the criminalist and the DNA
Right.
analyst, but is there a theme?
Not necessarily. The case assignment is fairly uniform in terms of, if there's a particular analyst that has, it's tough because, homicide, this 679 would include homicides, sexual assaults, threatening letters, property crimes, shots fired. So some of those cases may not need any analysis. Others might have 50 pieces of evidence to examine, so they're not all equivalent, if you will.
Okay, so some are more complex than others, but there's no trend.
Correct, that's correct, yes. And one other piece of information I think might be helpful is, you know, in order to reduce the backlog, many crime labs and DNA sections will focus their efforts on things like homicides and more violent crimes, certainly violent felonies. Our crime laboratory has the philosophy of if a case requires, if DNA testing can assist a case, we will process it. So we will process a threatening letter, homicide, sexual assault, any type of case, and certainly with the database, the convicted offender database, CODIS, we really see a very high return on property crimes. So those are the cases that if we can work on them, devote some effort to them, we find that those make matches or hits in the database and can come to a you know, resolution in court.
There's a higher return on those.
Correct.
On those efforts. And then, so we hope that adding 2 more positions will reduce the number of backlogged cases.
Correct.
Are there other limitations other than staffing that you know, lead to backlog, whether it's space or other technologies that aren't necessarily human capital?
Certainly, space is always premium, and the laboratory, I've worked at the laboratory for 18 years, and we've grown, our staff has doubled in that time, and our space has not doubled. So that obviously could assist, but primarily the staffing tends to be the rate-limiting step, if you will.
I've been over to your lab a few times for the forensics week or whatever it is. And
Yeah, the open house, yeah.
You know, it's fascinating to see all of the great work that's happening there, the unfortunate work, but thank you for doing it. That's it for me, Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Just one last question. It's great that you guys have a strategic plan to reduce the backlog. Do you have a time frame on when it might go down to, say, 0? Or somewhere?
I don't have a flat answer for that. However, it's really dependent on training. So the analysts, both of these positions are actually funded now when we put the application in, excuse me, not funded, filled. When we put the application in, only one of the 2 was filled. So both of the analysts are now in a training program, and a training program for a criminalist in the criminalistic section can be up to 6 months or so. For the DNA analyst would be closer to a year, and to have them a fully functioning analyst in terms of doing all the technical review and paperwork, it's closer to 2 years, and that's pretty standard for DNA analysts across the country. So after about a year, 6 months to a year, they're processing casework. So that is really the timeline, you know, and then of course, if we've had some resignations over the past few years and things that affect the timeline as well.
That's very helpful. Anything else you want to add?
That's it for me, thank you.
Well, thank you for all you do, and please tell your team the same. Does anyone else have anything else to add on any of the dockets? Okay. Do we have any folks who are testifying, public testimony? No. Well, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you.